morning, we are wrapping up the series that we've been in over the last couple of weeks called Before the Cross. And it's Palm Sunday, and so we'll get to what that is in just a moment if you're not familiar with that term or what Palm Sunday represents. But as we kind of wrap this series up, I thought I would tell you about an interaction that is a pretty common interaction for my wife and myself. Every time that Danielle and that we go to the airport, we have a moment. It's this moment that we have to decide what we're going to do when we get into security. How many of you guys have a moment like that? Let me tell you specifically why we have this moment. I have TSA pre-check. My wife doesn't. I don't know why she doesn't. Every time we're in the airport, we have this conversation. Like I said, it's a moment. And every time I say, it's $85 for 5 years. It's well worth the investment. And like, you know, it's comical, it's not comical, it's serious. But we have this moment where we have to like figure out, like, what are we going to do? And the question that we have to really ask in that moment is, really what I have to ask is, do I stay with my wife, or do I go ahead and meet her on the other side of security while she stays behind? And the answer is really, really simple. I go ahead. No, I don't. When I got married, someone said, happy wife, happy life. And I figured that's pretty much true, right? Because it seems like a simple decision. I have access to go quick. She doesn't. I should just use that. It's a logistical thing, but it's not simple because the question at hand isn't logistics. It's not a logistical question that we're wrestling with in that moment. It is actually a relational one. See, for the longest time, I thought what was happening as we would get to the airport, as we got to security, what I thought what was happening is that we were figuring out in that moment what we were going to do, what I was going to do, which line that we were actually going to get in. But what I've come to realize over the years is that's not actually true. The decision gets made a lot earlier than the moment that we stand in line. Right? Like that decision, it gets made actually the night before when we're talking about timing and trying to lay out all the logistical pieces to getting to the airport and getting through security and getting to our plane, only to be complicated when the kids are with us, right? Like I think it's this moment that the decision is made, but what I've come to realize is the decision is made far before that moment. You see, by the time we're standing before security, we're not deciding anything. We're just executing a direction that has already been decided. Maybe it hasn't been verbalized, but we are executing what we know has already been set. And I tell you that, we can make fun of it. Maybe you find yourself in the same predicament. Maybe you're like, no, I abandoned my wife in regular security. Or maybe you're like, no, I leave my husband. I have clear, forget pre-check, that's for losers. Like, I get to go straight through. Like, it's not just for airports that we wrestle with this. This is true in life. Most of us have a tendency to think that we are making decisions in the moment. We think, well, when this thing pops up, I'm making a decision to what I'm going to do. But often what happens is in those moments, we're not actually deciding. Those moments reveal what we've already decided. They reveal the direction that we've been heading in. It's the direction we've been moving, because most of life, right? Like most of life isn't made up of big, dramatic decisions. It's often made up of small decisions, quiet decisions, often decisions that go unnoticed. That's how most of life operates. In those moments, those decisions, those quiet things that go unnoticed, they reveal a lot about the direction our life is headed. They reveal a lot about what we've already decided, even though we might not know we've made that decision. Right? It's revealed in how we respond when someone frustrates us. It's revealed in how we respond when things don't go our way. It's revealed in what we turn to in those moments when we find ourselves stressed. It's what we prioritize when no one is seemingly watching. Right? And in each of these small decisions, they don't feel like a big thing in that moment. Like I said, a lot of times these small decisions, they go unnoticed, but over time they stack. Over time they build upon one another. They start to form a behavior. They start to form a pattern that ultimately, eventually becomes the direction of our lives. I love what the pastor by the name of Andy Stanley said. He's a pastor in the Atlanta area. He would say this. He would say, the direction, not intention, determines destination. Right? And that's true of our lives. It is the direction our lives are headed. It's the culmination of the small decisions that we make that stack, that form a direction. That direction, not what we intend to do, not what we intended to say, is actually what forms the destination of our lives. And this is exactly what we see happening here on Palm Sunday. And that's what I want us to talk about this morning. Now, like I mentioned, if you didn't grow up going to church, maybe you have no idea what Palm Sunday is. And so I want to make sure we're all on the same page. And in the Cliff Note version, this is what you need to know. Palm Sunday marks the beginning of the final week of Jesus' life, the week that is often referred to as Holy Week. Palm Sunday is the celebration of the moment in which Jesus entered into Jerusalem, both publicly and intentionally. But what I need us to understand as we dive into this story, by the time Jesus gets to Jerusalem, by and large, people aren't deciding what they believe about him. They're just revealing the direction that they were already moving. And what unfolds that we see as we go through this story is the byproduct of that decision. This is what Luke records in his gospel. We'll begin in Luke chapter 19, beginning in verse 35. So they brought the colt to Jesus and threw their garments over it for him to ride on. As he rode along, the colt spread out their garments. The crowd spread out their garments on the road ahead of him. When he reached the place where the road started down the Mount of Olives, all of his followers began to shout and sing as they walked along, praising God for all the wonderful miracles that they had seen. Blessings on the King who comes in the name of the Lord, they declare. Peace in heaven and glory in highest heaven. Like, what I need us to understand is what unfolds, it begins to unfold in this moment, is a celebration. It's a celebration filled with hope. It's filled with anticipation. People are eager. They have been waiting for this moment. But I also want us to note who is the one that is driving it. It's not Jesus that is gathering the people. It's not Jesus that is telling them, well, they should be expectant because he's arrived. No, it's actually his followers. It is the people that have been moving with him, that have been learning from him. These are the people that are leading the charge. These are people who already decided who Jesus was. Now, nothing about this scene, nothing about what is unfolding here in this moment is random. Matter of fact, in the Old Testament, which was written a long time before what we see happening right here, there is a book that is called Zechariah. And in Zechariah, in chapter 9, there is a story that is told of the coming king of Israel. And in that reference, we're told that Israel's king would come righteous and victorious, yet humble, riding on a donkey's colt. Riding on a colt, I'm sorry. And so when Jesus comes in and he fits this Old Testament prophecy, he's not just matching what was said, he's making a declaration. It's a statement of intent. He's wanting to make it clear to everyone about the kind of king he is. You see, Jesus is a king who comes in humility. He's a king who doesn't force his way. He's a king who invites rather than intimidates. In all of these details, they matter. Maybe they matter more than we realize, because in Jesus' day, this was not the posture of kings. Like, this is not what kings did. Kings didn't ride donkeys. It's not their mode of transportation. In Jesus' day, kings rode in on war horses. Kings came with force, but not Jesus and not his kingdom. Jesus, as he rides into Jerusalem, is redefining what power looks like. That power is not domination, it's not control or winning at all costs. Power in God's kingdom looks like humility. And if the crowd misses that, if we miss that, we miss Jesus. That Jesus' kingdom looks completely different than the kingdoms of this world. Now here's what's fascinating as this is unfolding, and we often don't talk about this a lot on Palm Sunday, but scholars, by and large, agree that as this procession is happening with Jesus riding on a donkey, that there is actually another procession happening on the other side of the city. Jesus is entering in from the west, and Pontius Pilate, who many of you know, they believe that he was entering in from the east. And so you have two people representing two very different power structures. Jesus is a king. Pilate is not a king. Pilate is a governor, and he is there to represent Rome. And can you guess what he would have likely rode into the city on? A war horse. And so you have Jesus coming in on a donkey. You have Pilate coming in on a war horse with an army of soldiers alongside him. One in a donkey, one backed by military force. One marked by humility, another one marked by intimidation. One offering peace, the other one seeking to enforce control. You have two very different processionals happening likely at the same time. And the people have to choose. Most of them, this moment, like I said, it's not the choice, it's revealing, but still others who are maybe picking up on all of this as it's unfolding, they have to choose in this moment which kingdom will they align themselves with. Is it the way of Pilate? Or is it the way of Jesus? What are they going to align themselves with, and who are they going to choose to follow? Some people see Jesus and they think, well, this is our king. Like, this is the one that the scriptures have been pointing to. This is the one that we have been waiting for. And so it makes sense for us to follow Jesus. Others have lived under the power and the control of Rome, and they think, well, if Rome says, well, then this is the direction that we follow. And then there's others maybe in between who haven't sided with Rome or haven't chose the way of Jesus, but they see Jesus as a problem. Matter of fact, that's exactly what the Pharisees thought. When they see Jesus, they think this is a problem. And we read this in verse 39. But some of the Pharisees among the crowd said, "Teacher, rebuke your followers for saying things like that." He replied, if they kept quiet, the stones along the road would burst into cheers. In other words, what Jesus is really saying is that this moment, it cannot be stopped. Like, I could silence my followers, but then the stones would just burst into cheers. This can't be stopped, and it will not be forced. Jesus is revealing who he is, and people are responding. And of course, this is creating tension. Right? This whole moment is creating tension because Jesus, as he reveals who he is, as he continued to reveal what he is about, it confronts the expectations of what the crowd had. Right? Because what they were looking for wasn't just Jesus. They were looking for the kind of king that fit their desires, their expectations, their wants and needs. And as this is happening, really something unexpected happens next as Jesus comes closer to Jerusalem. And as he saw the city ahead, he began to weep. How I wish today that you, of all people, would understand the way to peace. But now it's too late, and peace is hidden from your eyes. Now we have to ask ourselves, why does Jesus say this? Right? Like in the flow of what's happening here, it almost feels a little out of order, maybe a little out of step with the moment. I think the reason why Jesus says these words is because he knows clearly what is coming. He knows that the same people who are lining the streets, who are lining the roads to celebrate him in this moment will soon reject him. He knows that even though they're excited about the idea of the king, again, as I just said, they're not excited about the kind of king Jesus actually is. They want a king who will overthrow Rome. But Jesus came to overthrow sin. They want a king who will intimidate and bring immediate change. But Jesus came to bring eternal change. They want the kind of king who will bring the kind of power that they can visibly see. But Jesus is actually bringing the kind of peace that they can't see, the kind of peace that they simply have to trust. And because of that gap, because of that misexpectation, they miss Jesus. And they don't miss Jesus because they're evil. They miss Jesus because they're expecting something different. They're expecting a different kind of king. And like this is the tension of Palm Sunday. Not everyone outright rejects Jesus. Many people simply misunderstand him or miss him altogether. You see, the crowd wants Jesus to fix their problems, not change their hearts. They want Jesus to give them peace, but not when it costs them surrender. They want Jesus to be part of their lives, but maybe not at the center of their lives. And when he doesn't do what they want, when he doesn't meet their needs, the tendency of people, not just back then, it's the tendency we even see in our lives today, is when Jesus doesn't match the expectations that we have or meet the needs that we have, we tend to drift. Which is why this moment matters. Which is why Palm Sunday is so important. Because you don't just get to choose what you believe in any moment, like it doesn't have ramifications. Like what you believe ultimately forms how you live. The way you live your life, the way that I live my life, puts on display what it is we actually believe. And we don't make those decisions in a moment. Those moments just reveal what we've already decided. Which brings this story into our world. Right? Because it's not just the tension of Jesus' day, it's the tension in our world today. There is the way of Pilate, the way of living which is built on power and control and image, the way that says protect yourself, promote yourself, make sure you come out top, and it works. And when it works, it feels strong, at least for a little while. And then there is the way of Jesus. It is quieter. It is less flashy. It invites surrender. It encourages us to serve. It requires us to trust God with the outcome of our lives. There are two processionals happening in this moment of Palm Sunday, marked by different values, each leading to a different destination. And what we see happening in the Bible is mirrored in our world today, that we are pulled in attention every single day. What are we going to choose? Which is why we need to ask ourselves this very important question. It's this: which procession am I actually in? The way of Jesus or the way of Pilate? What am I actually in? Not which one do you admire, not which one do you agree with, but which one does your life reflect? Because it is possible for us to cheer for Jesus and still live lives aligned with Pilate. It's possible for us to celebrate Jesus, cheer for Jesus, say, yay, Jesus, even say that he is our Lord and still lead lives aligned with Pilate. And let me tell you why I can say that so confidently. Because the same crowd that cheered for Jesus, the same crowd that shouted Hosanna a few days later, was the same people who shouted, crucify him. Because he didn't meet their expectation. Because they had decided that this wasn't the king that they needed. That same tension we have to decide, which is, again, why we come back to this question: which processional are you in? And sometimes in these moments, it can be hard to sort and sift where we find ourselves. And so let me just ask you a few questions that reveal a lot about what we've already decided long ago. When life gets hard, which direction do you lean? Do you lean towards Jesus? Or do you lean to yourself and to the world? When you feel threatened, do you grasp for control or do you trust God? When following Jesus costs something, do you stay or do you step away? These are the moments. These are the kind of moments that reveal to us, maybe in small and subtle ways, the procession that we're actually a part of. Because again, I know I'm repeating myself, but I need us to understand this. These are the moments that don't force us into a decision. These are the moments that reveal what you've already decided. It reveals what you believe. You see, most Christians don't just wake up one day and consciously make the decision to choose the way of the world, to choose the way of Pilate. It's not like we're like, oh, that seems like it's a logical choice to make. It's not a conscious decision. It's often a drifted into decision. We don't decide it, but we find ourselves there. We slide into this place not by one big decision, but by little decisions over time that form habits, little decisions that create reaction. All of these little moments, if we allow them to go by unchecked, we begin to slide into allegiance to a different kind of kingdom. And it happens every time we choose control instead of trust, when we choose image instead of authenticity, when we choose winning over humility. And over time, all of these choices form our direction. And I'll remind us again of what Andy Stanley said: direction, not intention, determines destination. Direction, not intention, determines destination. By the time pressure hits, which it always does, all of us experience pressure in our lives. By the time the pressure hits, our direction has already been set. And so this is where Palm Sunday, it it can make a difference if we allow it. Because Palm Sunday invites us to take a step back. Palm Sunday asks us to look at everything that's happening, to look at what's unfolding in this moment, to recognize the tension in our own lives, in our world today, and for us to pause and to intentionally ask ourselves the important question of, where is my life? Where is your life actually headed? Which kingdom are you aligning yourself with? And sometimes I think we start to believe that the questions of faith are only personal in nature. Like, Mike, why does it really matter what kingdom I align with or what I believe on any sort of these things? Why do I need to wrestle with this tension? And let me just tell you why. Because I believe that the Bible is very clear that the purpose of us walking out our faith is to grow in our depth and our connection, our relationship with Jesus, but also, just as importantly, to put on display our witness to the world. And so I think if we really care about the mission of Jesus, if we really, truly, deep down care about our witness to the world, then we have to very intentionally reject the way of Pilate. And we have to embrace the way of Jesus. And it would be really easy. I mean, honestly, it would be really easy if it was like a decision that we can make one time. I'm going to choose the way of Jesus, and then all of life would just flow from that decision. But it's not just a one-time decision. It is a daily decision that we have to choose the way of Jesus, not just in what we believe, but in how we practice what we believe, how we live out what we believe. And again, Palm Sunday invites us to sit with the weight of that decision. That there's two processionals happening right at this moment. One represents the world, one represents Jesus. Which one will you choose? See, as we step into Holy Week this week, as we move towards Easter, let this morning and let this week remind us not just of what Jesus did, but what he continues to do. And not just the moment that Jesus shaped our lives. Because here's the thing, like, Jesus didn't just give his life so that we could admire him. Oh, wow, he's a good teacher. Oh, wow, like, he's the Savior. He gave his life for me. Like, Jesus didn't come in this world to be admired. He came into this world to be followed. And following Jesus means choosing his way, even when it's slow, even when it's harder, even when it requires sacrifice. We choose the way of Jesus because we see in him the ultimate example of what sacrifice looks like. See, every single week as a church, one of the things that we do is we take communion together. And again, if like you're new to church, this might be something new to you, but really what communion is communion is an opportunity for believers all over the world to be reminded of what Jesus has done for them. Right? Like communion, it takes the importance of the moment. It takes the importance of the cross, where Jesus' body was put up on that cross, where Jesus' blood was poured out for us. And we take these very simple things, like a cracker and a juice, a cup of juice, and maybe you grab that on the way in. If you didn't grab it on the way in, because you're new here, just raise your hand, or if you forgot, raise your hand right now, and some of our volunteers will come and they'll make sure that you have communion. Every week we take these reminders and we sit in this posture of the moment with gratitude for what Jesus has done for us. We're reminded that the way of Jesus costs. That the way of Jesus required him to give up his life so that you and I could be made whole before God. That's what he's done for us. But there's also still a mission for us to carry out. And so as we take communion, we live in this tension place where we say, God, thank you for the sacrifice of your son, Jesus. Thank you for what he has done for me. But at the same time, we say, Jesus, as I sit in this moment, I know that you are the one I choose. And choosing you means I need to follow you. And I have a mission to live out. I have a life that is being put on display. And my life will represent your kingdom and your way.